In this video, Jordan Peterson explains how we use abstractions of people and things in our daily life.
So you might ask, well, what exactly is intelligence? And maybe what exactly is the ability to abstract? And I think it's something like this. The world is made out of, the world is a very, very high resolution place. No matter how much you zoom into something, you can zoom in more. There's information at more and more and more and more levels of detail. And then also, no matter how far you back away from something, there's more and more and more levels of detail. So, you guys are composed of a whole variety of subsystems, complex functioning subsystems, all the way down to the subatomic level. And then above your phenomenological level of perception, you're members of families, you're members of cities, you're members of provinces and nationalities and international organizations and ecological structures and so forth and so on. And all of that's characteristic of you all the time and in every situation. But you don't deal with all that information, and you can't. And so one of the things that people seem to have learned how to do is to abstract from that. And I'm not exactly sure what it means to abstract, but it seems to me that it means something that's similar to producing a low-resolution representation, like a thumbnail. And so actually, when I look at each of you, what I'm actually seeing is a thumbnail of what you are. First of all, obviously, I don't see the other side of you, or either side for that matter. I only see you face on, so in some sense it's a two-dimensional thumbnail, and then I have no idea what's going on in the subsystems that constitute you at levels outside, underneath your mere surface. That's a complex diagnostic problem, for example, if there was something wrong with you, and I can't see your families, or except in very, low resolution ways, your nationality or any of the systems that you're identified with and embedded in. So just looking at you is an act of abstraction, and part of that, thankfully, is done by the fact that our sensory systems just aren't that good. So there's a whole bunch of things we can't perceive, and that simplifies the problem. Now, what we're hoping is that I can perceive enough of you at a given time so that if I interact with you, I get what I want and you get what you want, roughly speaking. It's something like that. So what we hope is the model, the abstract model, even of perception itself, is sufficiently accurate so that it's a sufficiently unbiased sample of the reality that it reflects, so that if I interact with it, things work out the way that I would like them to work out. But there's lots of times when that doesn't happen at all, right? It doesn't happen when you're sick. The fact is that the resolution of your sensory apparatus is a huge impediment to figuring out why you might be ill. And it doesn't help much either when people are engaged in struggles that go beyond the merely personal. So if I happen to be the member of one ethnic group and you happen to be the member of another, and there's strife between those two ethnic groups, then the fact that I can perceive you at this level of resolution might have very little to do with my ability to solve that particular problem. Now, obviously people can abstract, and part of that's just built into us so that we abstract the phenomena that we see. But then human beings, I think, in some sense are capable of meta-abstraction. So I think what happens is you can imagine that there's the phenomena in and of itself, whatever that is, that complicated multi-layer thing that's always in front of you, and then there's your representation of it, which is what you perceive, which is already abstracted to a tremendous degree and limited to a tremendous degree, and then there's abstractions of that. So what it seems to me to be is that language is a thumbnail of images that are a thumbnail of the reality of things. It's something like that. So it's a dual compression. So if I say cat to you, what the word cat does for you is produce the image of a generic cat, which is already a kind of abstraction, and then that's attached to your understanding in some sense, so that you can generate the understanding that would go along with, at least in part, with perceiving or interacting with a real cat. So in some sense what you're doing is I'm compressing the information down to a tremendously low resolution thumbnail, and I'm throwing that at you, and you decompress it into a low resolution image, and then you decompress that into something that's roughly equivalent to reality. That's what you're doing when you're reading a book, for example, right? Because when you read the book, you can conjure up images of the places that the author is talking about. You conjure up images of the characters themselves. So to such a degree that if you go to see a movie that's made of your favorite book, you might be irritated because the person in the movie looks nothing like the person that you read about, at least as far as your imagination was concerned. Now, intelligence in general seems to be whatever underlies the ability to generate those low resolution representations and to utilize them. So that would mean to manipulate them in your own mind, but also to communicate them to others. A big part of intelligence is working memory. And working memory is, well, while you're sitting there thinking, if you're thinking, how many of you think in words primarily as far as you're concerned? So, how many of you don't? Think in images? Anybody? Images? Well, that's another possibility. How many of you think in words and images? Okay, well that's fine. You know, the images are already a representation, and in many ways the words are a representation of the images. And so your ability to abstract and then your ability to manipulate those abstractions seems to be at the core of whatever intelligence is, and that's what IQ purports to measure. Your working memory, so when you're, if you sit there right now, so let's do this. Here's the sentence to think about. Okay, now think about that sentence. Okay, so the faculty that you're using to represent that sentence to yourself is working memory. And it's not very powerful. You can't contain very much in your working memory. 7 digits is about the maximum. Now, people vary. Some people think that 4 bits of information is actually the limit to working memory. Some people think it's closer to 7, but it's not very much. That's why telephone numbers tend to be 7 digits long. So you can kind of easily remember 7 things, which is not very many things. You know, so part of what your intelligence is the breadth of that working memory and then the speed with which you can run abstractions through it. So